Well, a major issue you're all addressing, the major one of the world. We're going through a major transition. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, we're all getting digitalized, whether we like it or not. And one of the things that's going to happen, unless we wake up and unless we get serious about change, the increasing power of artificial intelligence gets more powerful as it gets more powerful, as it gets more powerful, and universality. It doesn't matter where you are in the world. It can simultaneously become more powerful, which means that some of the basic economic trends will be made even worse unless we change. The concentration of wealth is increasing, income gaps are widening, employment less economic growth seems to be the new norm. Return on investment in capital and technology is usually better than labor. Future technologies can replace much of human labor. Long-term structural unemployment is a business as usual, surprise-free trend forecast. So what do we do about this? Well, we begin by reading all the research. The Millenium Project, the global think tank, we read as much research as we could get on the future technology and employment economic impacts in the whole business. And I can report to you that most of the studies only look 5 years in advance. And you can't really talk about big cultural change and big economic change and so forth in 5 years. It also tended to look at one country, understandably, but we all know that all countries influence each other. And none of the studies mention synthetic biology. This is the synthesis of different genes to make new species, which will become a very big deal. Synthetic biology could become a bigger deal than the Industrial Revolution. None of the studies had that in them at all. So we made a list of all those things that were not answered or not asked well, or not asked at all, or not answered well, and then did some questionnaires, collected all those information, and put together alternative scenarios to show that it can go in different ways. There's nothing guaranteed about the future, so it depends on what we do. And so we ended up with 3 scenarios, each one 10 pages. These are not simple descriptions of the future like you'd often see. These are stories that connect the future with the present tense, with cause and effect links along the way, so that you expose what you don't know. That's the key of scenarios, to expose what you don't know. So you stop writing and then do some research and come back and go back and forth. So each of these scenarios, 10 pages, rich detail. I mean, really rich detail. I've done futures research for 50 years. These are some of the best scenarios I've ever produced. They're really good for reading. I wish you'd go through them. The first one, mixed bag. That's like you have good decisions and you have bad decisions, and you have irregular activities. Excellent stuff, terrible stuff. It's a mixed bag, which is a very plausible mixed bag. And we have to address those things we don't like in that scenario and then accent the ones we do like, of course. Scenario 2, if you have friends that are too optimistic, let them read scenario 2. This is where everything goes wrong. Governments don't anticipate the transition of advanced technologies and next technologies, not just AI, but a lot of other, don't advance how much this is going to change. And as a result, they're not prepared for it. So the unemployment rates go skyrocketing, 2030, 2035, really big unemployment stuff, social chaos, organized crime comes in, militias come in, corporations create their own, not countries, but their own sort of like world identity systems and act like governments all to themselves. It's a mess. And it's plausible if we don't anticipate the future. 3, everything goes great. If humans were free, the self-actualizing economy, governments did anticipate the big changes in this scenario, and it shows how they slowly put together the right actions and tested them ahead of time, so that when 2030, 2035, the big changes happen, they move into it very smoothly, and that people start to make a living out of their own creativity, their own self-actualization, connecting to markets worldwide. Still, maybe 1 out of every 6 people have conventional jobs, doing conventional things, running a society, making civilization work. But the 5 out of 6 are doing all kinds of other things that are different than today. We put all these scenarios into a report. Reyhan Hasnova, the chair of the Millennium Project in Azerbaijan, can tell you a little bit about that report. She has some copies of that. And then we took these scenarios and we gave them to our nodes around the world and said, okay, have people read the scenarios and then come into a meeting and a workshop and come up with what are the strategies in business, what are the strategies in government, what are the strategies in education, what are the strategies for the science and technology community, and what are the strategies for the arts and media, which is extremely important to help cultures change. Culture is run by arts and media. So if you're going to have the culture move into the new future, then the artists and the writers and the playwrights and the movies and the television have to be involved helping people make that transition. So hundreds of strategies were created all around the world. We reduced these down to about 93, and then we had each of them assessed internationally on how the action could work, how it could not work, what you'd have to do to make sure it works. And only one of those 93s was science and technology education. It's one of the actions. It's good action, but it's just one. And most of these studies I talked about, that was the only suggestion they had, increase science and technology education. We got to do more than that. Because if 1 out of 6 is going to make a living in that area, then what about the other 5? Okay. It's important to understand distinctions of artificial intelligence, because people talk about AI as if it's the same thing. There's 3 different kinds of it. And people get it all muddled together, and it's confusing the world. The first is artificial narrow intelligence. That's what we have today. That's the thing that wins in chess, in AlphaGo. That's the thing that diagnoses cancer, that drives a truck, etc. That's narrow intelligence. It's machine learning. It's going very fast. It's doing all the things people, but it's narrow. The AI that diagnoses cancer cannot drive a truck. The second one is general intelligence. We don't have it yet, but the big competition between China, the United States, the European Union, and Japan, and other countries is to get to general intelligence. When Putin said, whoever gets that rules the world, he's referring to general, not narrow, because narrow is already here. General intelligence is like us in the sense that we can address new problems and be creative. We call up people, we do all kinds of stuff to solve a problem. That's what general intelligence does. Remember, narrow stays in its category, learns in the category fast, but general goes beyond that. It draws on the Internet of Things, it makes phone calls, it reads documents, it goes through the sensor networks of the world. It can do all kinds of stuff. So when people say general intelligence is human capability, narrow intelligence can be beyond human intelligence in certain areas, right? But it's still narrow. General intelligence hits across the world simultaneously and in creative ways that we may not always understand. So as a result, narrow intelligence, you can forecast unemployment, like you can know how many trucks are being created with a self-driving truck. You can know how long it will take to deliver the trucks, how many people would be unemployed. You can predict those linear things and you can prepare for them. But general intelligence cuts across the whole system. That's maybe 2030, 2035, we don't know. And it may never happen, by the way. Artificial general intelligence is really tough. But most people I know working on it think, yes, we can do it. It's possible. It's just extremely difficult. Artificial superintelligence is general intelligence, with the big exception that it is emerged beyond general intelligence and beyond our understanding. It sets its own goals, it sets its own strategies without permission with humans. It goes beyond what humans can understand. That's what science fiction is warning us about. That's what Elon Musk is warning us about. This is superintelligence. We don't have that yet. We don't know if it will emerge out of general intelligence, but we think it will. And we don't know how long it will take. It could happen immediately, or it could happen never. We don't know. So we have to take these uncertainties, organize them into scenarios, and think about what we do about each of these things. And that's a good thing you're doing right now in this conference. It's part of making the future better. Now, I mentioned artificial intelligence is already beyond human intelligence in certain areas. For example, lip reading, flying airplanes, driving trucks, mathematics, voice translation, sorry, translators there, playing games, face recognition, medical diagnosis, reading comprehension speed. You can read a whole library in a short period of time and understand it and organize the insights already. Legal analysis, income tax preparation. I've been using income tax preparation with AI for several years now. Organized shipping, Amazon. How much of Amazon is organized by AI? Specific research, Google. You use Google all the time. That's artificial intelligence. Traffic navigation and AI robots for repetitive behavior. Whatever can be repeated can be automated, obviously. Okay. That's one area. The second thing is we have to understand that the big changes coming up are not just artificial intelligence, be it narrow, general, and super. We refer, because there's too many coming up, so we don't want to say them all. So we use the term NT for next technologies, just like we do with IT for information technologies. It's software, it's hardware, it's all these things together. You don't want to keep saying it all, so you just say IT. Same thing for next technology. So next technologies refers to all these things. Robotics, synthetic biology, as I mentioned, synthetic biology is a synthesis of different genes from different species that make completely new capabilities. Computational science, so instead of the slow, laborious scientific process of laboratories and testing and all that, you can do computer simulations. Thousands and thousands of simultaneous simulations at the same time, which means it'll speed up scientific research much faster than it has been before. Cloud and big data analytics, artificial and augmented reality, nanotechnology, two kinds. What we have today is big machines making little things. What we don't have yet is little things making big things, like a leaf. A leaf is nanotechnology for food. It does molecular manufacturing. We'll learn how to do that. That's a bigger deal than the nanotech we have today. Internet of Things, everything, everybody, the semantic web. Quantum computing is already online, beginning right now. Quantum computing would make security in narrow intelligence operations obsolete. We'll have to deal with this issue. Telepresence, holographic communications, intelligence augmentation, collective intelligence, blockchain, 3D and 4D printing. 4D printing, by the way, is you print it in 3D, but it can reorganize itself. So it's 3D, it's 4D in the sense of through time it makes some change. And we do it both in materials and biology. Japan has already 3D printed a steak. So there's meat, cells and so forth, but organized like a cell of a steak. Drones, driverless cars, other autonomous vehicles, conscious technology, the relationship of consciousness and technology becomes a continuum, like a blur. And the key thing is the synergies among all of NT. Your telephone is a synergies relationship of camera, voice, calendars, data bank, internet access, all those things together. But imagine the integration of these kinds of technologies. That's where the innovations will be coming up in the future. So I've mentioned about the unemployment problem and all of these new technologies coming up and how it can affect replacing a lot of previous other stuff. But why is it different this time? Because in the past, the innovations led to more jobs, didn't lead to fewer jobs. I mean, more jobs changed, yes, but more and more employment. So what's different this time? Why are we worried? One, acceleration of change. It's much different today than the transition from the agricultural age to the industrial age, or from the industrial age to the information age. Much faster today. The globalization, interactions, and synergies among NTs. The existence of a global platform, the internet, for simultaneous technology transfer with far fewer errors and mistakes in the transfer than in the past. How many things do you experience in the last 10 years that were mistakes? I mean, mistakes slow you up, but a lot of mistakes are knocked out as you have this common platform. Before, when I helped a lot of countries get what's called packet switching that made internet cheap, I had to get in a jet plane, stay in a hotel, all kinds of stuff for one little device getting into a country. Now, we already have that platform. We have a platform for the whole world to instantaneously transfer knowledge, transfer technology, transfer all kinds of stuff simultaneously without errors. Big deal. Standardization of databases and protocols means that we can do global research together. It also can create more change than in the past, faster. Fewer plateaus or pauses of change. For example, I am sitting in front of a laptop. It has more capabilities than the one I had in 1992, but it's still got a keyboard here, it's still got a screen here, and I can fold it up, and I can walk with it. I've been able to do that for 30 years. You get used to it. But if the technology, hardware and software, keeps changing all the time, when do you get a chance to take a break and level out and get used to something? That's different. Billions of empowered people in relatively democratic free markets able to initiate activities. We have a whole system of education teaching people how to fit in. Well, more and more people are realizing they can create their future. That was not so much a choice in the past. You know, your whole deal was, how do I get a job and fit in? Well, if those jobs and fitting in is going to be knocked out, many cases, as just previous speakers mentioned, then new capabilities and new abilities to connect and make change and individual enterprises and activities are flowering and growing much faster than ever before, which means they make more change. Machines can learn how you do what you do. That's new. And can do it better eventually than you do it. That's new. So, scenario 3 is the good news. It explains how governments make some changes, what those changes are, relations between labor and management and universities and governments, how these things work out in a good way. Governments anticipate all these impacts and come up with good training and strategies and government programs ahead of time. They conduct extensive research in how to phase in universal basic income. Because if you have a lot of new technologies making new wealth, and that replacing a lot of labor at the same time, and then also the cost of living eventually starts to reduce by all these new technologies, then most people could be unemployed in conventional ways. So if so, how do we make this transition work? The social contract for the world, essentially, is you go to school, you do well, you get a job, you do well, and society gives you retirement, gives you health privileges, gives you hospitalization, gives you some money to live and retire. That's the social contract. But coming up, we're facing a future where you go to school, you do well, you get a job, you do well, and you get laid off, you get fired because you've been automated out of your job. We don't want to have a society where people are thrown in the streets for doing the right thing. So we'll have to have some sort of, it seems we'll have to have some sort of basic survival, not very much money, but enough so you're not thrown in the streets, which means that you are free to start to create new things. How many times have you not done something because somebody said, you can't do it, the proposal's turned down, etc. But if you can start to create activities and connect to people worldwide for your activities, then this means that you are freer to self-actualize, how to grow your own mind and be yourself, not just fitting in certain categories. Increasing intelligence becomes a goal of education. Society is not getting more simple. It's getting more complex. You got to use your mind more than you did in the past. So one of the goals, education goals around the world are, yes, give knowledge, make social good citizens, but the third category is improve the brain. We know that the brain can be improved. Didn't know this 50 years ago. Now we're learning you can actually improve brain functioning. That should be one of the purposes of education, to increase intelligence, as well as national intelligence, build the mind of Azerbaijan. How do you build the brain of a country? How do you put that together so the whole country learns together as well as the individuals get smarter? Self-employment becomes promoted. COVID has shown you that you can work at home in many cultures around the world, and people are starting to get used to the idea, maybe I can be at home, play on my computer, and access markets from what I'm interested in worldwide. That's a different deal. Don't like all that commuting anyway. Artists and media moguls and entertainers help to foster cultural change from an employment culture to a self-actualization economy. That's a gigantic shift. When people have their identity through their job and their boss telling them they're an economist or they're an architect or they're a teacher. But what happens if you're sort of naked to the world? You have to invent yourself. That's a very scary idea for most people. They want to have the security of a job and an identity. The idea that you're going to create your own, that's a fantasy. Well, that transition goes in a good way if the culture goes in a good way. And the culture goes in a good way if the writers of music, writers of television shows, writers of music and movies get engaged in helping us make that transition. Big deal in scenario 3 is the AI avatar. This, in a sense, when you're using social media, you're slowly turning over your values, your interests, your preferences, and all that, slowly but surely. Well, imagine you have your own artificial intelligence system that you become your partner with. Not exactly a duplicate you, but it's sort of like a duplicate you. But what it can do, among other things, is it can go running around the internet while you're sound asleep, finding all kinds of opportunities that you really want to do, and wakes you up in the morning and says, "Good morning. I have 75,000 things for you to do, but I've taken the liberty, knowing you, what ones you would want to really do because they're cool to do, they're fun to do, and those ones I've actually set up some smart contracts on a blockchain so that you can actually make a living out of these 15 things over here that you want to do, but they'll be paid for. So that each day you could literally invent yourself. Granted, not all people in the world will be able to do this, and it'll be a process over generations, but that's the drift, the general direction. Society as a whole is creating an autonomic nervous system. That's what AI is about. Like, you don't have to worry about beating your heart. You don't have to worry about your digestion. Your autonomic nervous system takes care of it. So in society, we had to think of everything. You know, you had to dig the ditch. Why you dig the ditch there? Because it's not going to work over. You had to think about everything. Well, now we're in the process of you don't have to think about everything. The basics and workings of civilization can be automated. That frees up the human mind. Just as the brain was freed up as the autonomic nervous system runs everything else, it allowed us to invent the future. We will be able to invent the future of civilization. What do we want to be as living beings? Between birth and death, do you really want to be just an economic animal fitting in? Or between birth and death, would you like to explore, to think, to create? That seems to be the direction of artificial intelligence, to make an autonomic nervous system, to run civilization so that we're freed up to invent the next status of civilization. Now, in education, we're going to be able to have AI augmented learning, increasingly. We have a little bit of that now, but it's going to increase. And COVID has pushed us in that direction, whether we liked it or not. It has accelerated all kinds of online artificial intelligence applications for learning. And you're going to see more and more of these things. Well, the AI avatar will be able to diagnose you the way you individually like to learn how to learn. What sequence, what colors, what combinations of things. Well, how do you want to play games? How do you learn? And what are the gaps? And as you respond, what are the gaps? Well, you didn't know this part. So then it'll help you fill those gaps so that you can learn creatively, originally, your own way. The idea of all people learning the same thing, in the same class, in the same way, is assuming that all people are the same, which is not the case. You do that for a factory, but most of the work will not be in a factory. It'll be creative, so we have to teach people to free up their mind to think. Now, a lot of money in the United States is going into exactly this. The National Science Foundation, everybody's welcome to have my PowerPoint slides here if they want. There's a link, when you click on the National Science Foundation there, it'll take you to a space where a lot of research is going on exactly about this. The money is pouring into it, the applications will start to roll out in the next few years. A lot of this will be happening, and I think the Ministry of Education should make some sort of agreement, check with the US Ambassador, how you can have an agreement with the National Science Foundation to be getting that stuff in real time simultaneously, so that you're not, waiting 4 or 5 or 6 years down the road and then getting older stuff. Now, just as eyeglasses augment RC, I'm not perfect, so I put these on, and everything is fine, okay? We augment our eyesight. We will augment our brains in the same way to become geniuses. Just like I can use the glasses and we all have a good 20/20 vision, right? What happens if we learn how to augment our brains so we all become essentially subgenius or geniuses? If I have a charged couple of a contact lens that has recognition and also connected to the internet, if I take an IQ test, why wouldn't I get every question right? Which would make the IQ tests sort of pointless once we have these kind of devices. Now, Elon Musk is making something called Neuralink. That's where he can actually take he made a fiber transceiver, transmit and receive. Transceiver is so small and so thin, it can fit next to a single neuron in the brain. They've already done this with pigs. And they put the pigs through different things, and they can see the brain activity. So slowly we'll learn how to decode the brain activity and have direct brain to computer to other humans. Transmission very, very quickly. Now, I'm a little scared of that myself. I would rather put them on my eyeglasses or put them on contact lenses, and then I'll let the other people do the stuff in the brain first. But what you can do is you can put some of the stuff in the brain, put when someone's paralyzed in the legs, put something down on the leg, and it can communicate back and forth, so it bypasses the break in the spine, so people who are paralyzed will be able to walk again. But it'll also be used for making us functional, not actual geniuses, but functional geniuses. Now, if people are worried about superintelligence taking over everything, and leaving us, like science fiction writers have sometimes said, leaving us in the ash heap of history, then there's an old story in my culture, maybe yours, that says, if you cannot beat them, join them. Okay, so if you can't beat this future of AI, then why not join it early on? And then we evolve together with the AI. And that's the assumption between Elon Musk, Neuralinks, and other smart contact lenses do it, is we evolve together. So as the artificial intelligence gets more intelligent, so do we in behavioral sense. I mean, the biology is still biology, but the function moves with it. So, some additional things is make increasing intelligence, as I said, an objective of education. You can do this today. I mean, Mr. Minister of Education, with the President's permission, you could say, we're going to declare increasing intelligence is an objective of education, which means that teachers have to, and teacher training schools have to learn, how do you improve the brain function? I mean, in education, we're not teaching a kneecap, We're not teaching an elbow, we're teaching a brain. We know about bodybuilding and physical exercises. Well, how about brain building? Right? Well, let's learn together how to do that. If we have an objective of education to increase individual intelligence, then the education systems will move in that direction. Integrate simulation-based learning using multiplayer environments. We know that playing back and forth in simulation, we'll have the capability to do it with games that kill each other. We can also have it in other kinds of games. I mean, imagine a simulated game where you're interacting and one of the avatars in the game is a made-up Einstein. So you're watching and interacting with Einstein, evolving his thinking through time to get to general and specific relativity. These kind of interaction gaming will be cheap after the initial costs. The second use of the software is a keystroke. In parallel to STEM education, as the previous speakers have said, we're going to have a hybrid system. You'll still learn the basics and so forth, but it's also can be self-based, inquiry-based learning for self-actualization, creativity, critical thinking, and human relations and AI tools. Now, I offer you two different kinds of education systems. South Korea, as you may know, is neurotic push, 7 days a week, tutors on the weekends. We're studying, cramming, studying like crazy. They're really fanatical. It's just crazy, going like crazy. Finland said, let's not do that. So they recently changed their system, throwing out a lot of textbooks, no more homework, and they're doing self-actualization education to a large degree, beginning it now. And Finland said, all right, so we will not do as well on our standard tests because of this change, but we'll be happier people. Turns out, and you can check this, you look at the standard scores of the countries, Finland is right there with South Korea. Completely different systems, but certainly happier people in Finland than in South Korea, neurotic stuff. So so Finland has proved that we can do this creativity, education, and still do algebra. Shift educational learning systems more toward mastering skills than mastering a profession. The professions keep changing. Skills, on the other hand, become new combinations, like your cell phone. Remember, the cell phone is integrating all these things, right? You're going to do the same thing with skills. Skills will be integrated much more in making you a more powerful, capable person. So focus on the skills, and that's still relevant. Teachers should help students learn how to find markets worldwide for what they're interested in doing to help them self-actualize. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say I'm going to Paris and I want to go to the Louvre. So I put them in my contact list around the world. I'm going to the Louvre tomorrow. Who would like to go with me? I will charge you €1. And so as I go and then people line up, and so then I give them access. So when I go to the Louvre, I have my little contact lenses or glasses or some device, and they can see what I'm seeing. And they can also say, oh, what's that over there? And I say, well, let's go see. Oh, what's that over there? Well, let's go see. Well, they get a rich experience going to the Louvre for €1. Now, let's say 50 people sign up. It's not an unreasonable estimate, 50 people, plus €50. That's a very nice lunch. So you can start to make income for what you wanted to do anyway. But the thing is, you couldn't do this in a local market, in a local place. You can't do that. But if you're picking out of billions of people worldwide, then it's possible. Continually apply new insights in cognitive science and the brain projects of the United States, China, European Union, and others to teaching and learning. We're learning all this sort of stuff about the brain and artificial intelligence together. So like, what of this learning on a daily basis should teachers integrate into their teaching and coaching of people? How do you have a continuous environment of learning new ways for the brain to learn. Great brain race is underway, not only for the general intelligence, as I mentioned, but also to learn how to improve the brain functioning. When you put these two things together, I offer you two countries. One country does all this stuff, increasing intelligence, artificial intelligence, integration, all that. Another country says, business as usual. 20 years later, what's the difference between two countries? Gigantic. So make teleeducation free everywhere, ubiquitous lifelong learning systems so that everybody can have access to these kinds of things simultaneously. As soon as 10 to 20 years. It might not. It's very difficult. But as your friendly neighborhood futurist, it's my job and other futurists' job to lay out the possibilities. And then you've got to plan for those different possibilities. So we're not shocked. So we should think in terms of maybe 10 to 15 years that this is possible. Artificial superintelligence, emerging from general intelligence, begins to invent its own future, its own objectives, its own activities, faster than humans can keep up, and will be done without our understanding. And because there's a race around the world for this stuff, for artificial general intelligence, I assume there'll be many general intelligences, and they'll collaborate somehow. And from that emerging superintelligence beyond our understanding. So, if we don't get the initial conditions right for the transition from narrow intelligence to general intelligence, then we'll have no control over how superintelligence evolves next. So the only chance we really have is this gap between narrow and general. How that gets done, how it's governed, that is extremely important to get right. Now, just as during the Cold War, the USSR and the United States had classified weapon systems, but they collaborated on how to manage it. So even though China, the United States, and others are competing with all this sort of stuff, they understand, people who do the work, understand that if you don't get those initial conditions right, we're all in trouble. The same with the nuclear war stuff. So we will learn how to collaborate to make this work. So we're going to have humans together around the world to do this, because if we don't get the governance and rules and audits right, then we run into the problems that science fiction writers are talking about. So, but we've got to get all the actors, not only governments, but corporations and even organized crime, because they're involved in this stuff too. We have to figure out, how do we, as a whole human species, have a governance system for this? It's extremely important, and it will take many years. I mean, it's been, 30, 40 years of climate change, and we still don't have a governance system on climate change, right? And people are talking about it up in Glasgow coming up. Still don't have it. So I assume that it'll take at least 10 to 20 years to create a governance system for this. It's very complex, it's very difficult. I sit on the IEEE, a governing standards committee on governance for AI. And that's just narrow AI, extremely intelligent, complex. In general, it's even much more. So we have to begin now, as a human species, to figure out, how do we put this governance system together? And it'll take years, and we got to start the process. And some people say, well, this is way down the road. You're going to stop creativity if you have the rules. Look, it's going to take 10 to 20 years for the rules, so don't worry about it. We won't be stopping anybody's research. We couldn't even stop it if we wanted to. So please go to our website, download the information, and have a happy future. Thank you.